Have you ever felt like you're the one who always has to hold it together? Not because you're unbreakable, but because somewhere along the way, people just stopped asking if you needed help too. Like they made a silent agreement with the version of you that's always stable, always calm, always fine. And now it feels impossible to break out of that role, even when you're exhausted, even when you're quietly falling apart inside. There's a strange kind of loneliness that comes with being the strong one. It's not loud or dramatic. It's quiet, heavy, a kind of emotional isolation that doesn't come from being alone, but from always being the one others lean on, and never the one allowed to lean. You don't remember when it started exactly. Maybe in childhood, maybe later. But at some point, you became the responsible one. The one who listens, who fixes, who adapts. And with each crisis you handled, with each time you said, "I'm okay," when you weren't, the world around you started to believe it. They began to count on your strength, even when it came at the cost of your own peace. And maybe you thought that if you kept showing up for others, eventually someone would notice when you needed someone too. That if you were dependable enough, kind enough, useful enough, someone would look past your surface and say, "Hey, you don't have to do this alone." But that moment never came. Or if it did, it was brief, fleeting. And so, you kept going. You became so good at appearing stable that even you started to believe it until your body gave out, or your sleep disappeared, or the silence after helping everyone else felt unbearable. That's the irony, isn't it? The more capable you seem, the less care you receive. The more pain you hide, the more invisible it becomes to others. And at some point, it stops feeling like a role you're playing and starts feeling like your identity. You don't even know how to ask for help anymore. Not because you don't want it, but because you're scared of what it might reveal. Scared that if you stop holding everyone else up, everything will collapse. Or worse, that no one will know how to hold you. That fear doesn't come out of nowhere. It's learned. Over years of watching what happens when vulnerability isn't met with understanding. Of seeing how people pull away when you stop being easy to be around. Of realizing that your emotional needs make others uncomfortable, so you start cutting them out before they can. Little by little, strength becomes silence. Helpfulness becomes self-abandonment, and presence becomes performance. And the world keeps applauding your resilience, while you quietly wonder how much longer you can keep this up. Sometimes, the people who seem the most put together are the ones carrying the heaviest emotional weight. They're the ones who show up with a smile even when they're hurting. The ones who listen deeply to everyone else's pain, but go home and sit with their own in silence. Because asking for support, real support, doesn't feel like an option. It feels like a risk, like opening a door that's been sealed shut for years and not knowing what will spill out if you do. So instead, you stay busy, productive, helpful. You check in on others, make them feel seen, take pride in being reliable. It's how you cope. It's how you survive. But beneath that quiet competence, there's a kind of grief. Not just grief for the moments when you needed someone and no one noticed, but grief for the parts of you that you've buried to keep being strong. The messy parts, the angry parts, the scared, needy, soft parts. The parts that were once loud and alive, but were told, directly or indirectly, that they made you hard to love. So you shrink them, tame them, hide them under layers of, "I'm good, and don't worry about me." You become emotionally efficient. You process quickly, move on quickly, forgive quickly, not because it's easy, but because if you don't, you fear you might finally break. But strength without softness isn't strength. It's self-denial. And when no one sees that, when they only see your capability, your composure, your calm, it reinforces the lie that you don't need emotional space, that you're above the need for comfort or care or being held through your own storms. What most people don't understand is that being the strong one isn't always a choice. Sometimes it's what you had to become. When life didn't give you safe places to fall apart, you learned to function instead. You became the one who holds things together, not because you wanted to, but because no one else did. And maybe that role kept you safe. Maybe it helped you survive environments where being vulnerable wasn't an option. But now, that same strength is quietly suffocating you. Because no one was meant to carry that much for that long without breaking. You start to notice it in subtle ways. How hard it is to cry, even when you're overwhelmed. How quickly you brush off compliments or care because it feels foreign. How you minimize your own pain so you don't become a burden. How deeply you long to be held, not physically, but emotionally. And how terrifying that kind of exposure feels. And maybe the hardest part is that when you finally reach the point of needing support, it feels too late. Like you've trained everyone around you to believe you're always okay. And now they don't know how to respond when you're not. That's the hidden cost of always being the strong one. You become emotionally invisible. Praised for your composure, admired for your resilience, but rarely asked what's going on beneath the surface. Over time, you start telling yourself stories to make sense of it. You say things like, "I don't need much," or "I process things on my own," or even, "I'm just built this way." And maybe parts of that feel true, but the full truth is harder to admit, that sometimes you've convinced yourself you don't need comfort because it hurts too much to want it and not receive it. That it's easier to act like you're fine than to feel the sting of emotional disappointment again. That's the thing no one talks about. Sometimes we don't protect ourselves because we're strong. We protect ourselves because we've been left alone in moments when we couldn't afford to fall apart. And now, even when support might be available, we don't know how to let it in. You start living in a kind of emotional middle ground. Not numb, but not fully alive either. Not in pain, but not really at peace. Just functional, stable, enough to keep going, not enough to feel whole. And the danger is, from the outside, that looks like strength. People admire you. They respect your reliability, your wisdom, your calm presence. But what they're often admiring isn't strength. It's suppression. A carefully constructed survival strategy that no one sees as a cry for help because it's so damn graceful. And maybe part of you likes being seen that way. Maybe it gives you a sense of control, of purpose, because if you're the strong one, then at least you have value. At least you're needed. At least you matter. But there's a difference between being needed and being known. And the deeper truth is, you don't want to be admired for your strength if it costs you your softness. You don't want people to depend on you if it means they never see you. You don't want to be the person who always has it together if it means no one notices when you're coming undone. Because beneath it all, you're still human, still longing for rest, still aching to be held, still hoping, even just quietly, that one day someone might say, "You don't have to carry it all. Not with me." And mean it. But to get there, to be held in that way, something has to shift. Not in them, in you. Because sometimes the first step toward being seen is letting yourself be vulnerable enough to be seen. Even if it feels unfamiliar, even if it feels terrifying, even if it means stepping out of the role that once protected you and into the truth of who you really are beneath the strength. Letting go of the strong one identity doesn't mean you become weak. It doesn't mean you stop being reliable or grounded or wise. It just means you start allowing room for your own humanity too. You stop performing stability and start embodying truth. You begin to notice the moments when you dismiss your own needs and pause. You begin to recognize when you're offering care out of love or out of the hope that someone might one day return it. You begin to ask yourself not just what others need from you, but what you need and what it would mean to finally honor that. And slowly, the armor softens, not all at once, not loudly, but in quiet, gentle ways. You start saying, "I'm tired," and not turning it into a joke. You let someone hug you a little longer than you're used to. You stop giving automatic answers like "I'm good," and instead say, "I don't really know how I'm doing." And when someone offers support, even in small ways, you try not to deflect it, because strength isn't just about how much you can carry. Sometimes it's about learning to let go, to let yourself be held, to let someone in, to admit that being human is heavy sometimes, and you were never meant to carry it alone. You don't have to earn rest. You don't have to prove your worth by staying composed. You don't have to hide your softness to be respected. The right people, the real people, will never love you because you're always strong. They'll love you despite it, because they'll see what's underneath, and they'll stay for that too. And maybe one day, you'll stop needing to be the strong one, because you'll realize you're already enough, even in your most unguarded moments, and that the deepest kind of strength is letting that be true.